Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. I know they're up against some pretty stiff competition from Greg Abbott's Texas and Ron DeSantis' Florida, but I'd like to nominate Louisiana as the most backward state in America. In May of 2016, Louisiana's inbred legislature passed a so-called law that included police as a protected group under the state's hate crimes laws. It's the only state in America to have a law like that. So in addition to the actual victims of hate crimes based on race, age, gender, religion, color, creed, disability, sexual orientation, national origin, ancestry, they've now added the imaginary category of a job as a hate crimes classification. So, your line of work can qualify you as a hate crime victim? Why not have a hate crimes law for mailmen then? They face far more violence and actual threats than the donut-chomping thugs in blue. Now, this so-called law goes on to specify that law enforcement officer means active or retired. Retired? So this is not about protecting police. It's about protecting a profession even if you no longer work in that said profession. Gee, is that how it works when you're black? The largest category of people who suffer hate crimes laws, is there a day when you can be retired from being black? And if you're going to be protecting people on the basis of whether they work or are retired, does that mean that if they get fired, that they're no longer protected? That if you harm them, it's not a hate crime anymore? And you know what else is also interesting? The legislators down there didn't see fit to make politicians a protected class. The crimes against political office holders are far more significant than anything the police claim to have happened to them. And yet, these lawmakers decided to ignore the danger to themselves. Why shouldn't their profession be protected against hate crimes? If we're protecting professions now, if we're protecting people's jobs. These are just a few of the contradictions that go along with this kind of agitprop. This kind of law is the perfect example of a solution, quote-unquote, desperately looking for a problem. And you won't be surprised to learn that many of the so-called legislators in Louisiana are themselves retired law enforcement, which of course makes them the most cowardly and corrupt individuals in the entire state. The entire idea behind asinine message legislation like this is to try to intimidate the public. That's what this is all about. It's about basically saying that anything that the police claim is a crime is a crime, if they just say so. Anything at all. But of course, this law wasn't passed because there was any actual threat to the thugs in blue. It was passed in order to give a wink and a nod to the police's typical criminality. Now remember, this law was passed in May of 2016. And not surprisingly, only 2 months later, on July 5th, 2016, 2 white cops in Baton Rouge murdered Alton Sterling in cold blood. They murdered him in the very city where this law was passed. And just for the record, because I know we got some white supremacist trash who like to lurk in the comments section, the shooting of those 4 cops in Baton Rouge, that occurred on July 17th of 2016. It was done in response to the murder of Alton Sterling. So the police weren't being attacked by anyone in May of 2016, and yet they passed this law anyway, when there was no basis for it. This so-called law was passed by a bunch of reprobate politicians in order to make racist cops feel emboldened to kill unarmed black people in cold blood. That was what brought about the alleged incident in July of that year. There hadn't been a problem until the police made a problem. Police are their own worst enemies. To say anything else is a pathetic deflection. When they take responsibility for the racists in their midst and stop breaking the law by attacking and killing black citizens, then the outrage against them will cease. But of course, this is not about whether or not there's public outrage. This is about white supremacist control. Why am I bringing all this up now? Because last month there was an incident in Louisiana where a man was accused of intentionally ramming a Baton Rouge police officer with his vehicle, and that man is now facing a hate crime charge. 41-year-old Gad Black of Baton Rouge has been arrested on a charge of first-degree murder. He's also been booked on additional counts of resisting an officer and hate crimes against law enforcement, the fictional category. Oh, and the individual who Mr. Black is accused of having hit with his vehicle, he's still in the hospital, but reports are that he's showing signs of improvement, so what that means is he's on the way to getting out of there. Of course, the white media is doing their part, trying to influence public opinion against Mr. Black. They're putting out stories claiming that minutes after the crash, someone using the name Gad Black posted on social media, "Rodney Hinton, I'm right there with ya homie." Now that sounds like the kind of crap that white FBI agents would write during COINTELPRO back in the 60s and 70s. This is the kind of stuff you expect from feds who are not black, but still the white media saying, well, this is Mr. Gad Black who posted this. And just for the record, Rodney Hinton, of course, is the aggrieved father in Ohio who gained national attention when his 18-year-old son was gunned down by police. And the next day, Mr. Hinton, after seeing the video of his child being killed, he himself was then accused of having struck a sheriff's deputy with his car. Now, there is a similarity between this case and the case of Mr. Hinton, but it's not anything that the white media is speaking about. According to records by the police, they say that Mr. Black's girlfriend, Asia Raby, called police to report the crash, saying, "I think a police officer just got hit or killed." Raby made statements that the driver might have been suffering a mental breakdown. And what was the response of the police to Miss Raby trying to be Miss Concerned Citizen? They arrested her too and put some charges on her as well. That's how they repaid her for her trying to help them. There's a lesson in that for black folks. Now, see, the thing here is, if they're going to be putting out reports saying that his girlfriend was saying that I think someone got hit or killed, obviously that would indicate that even if Mr. Black did hit that cop with his car, it clearly wasn't deliberate. Otherwise, his girlfriend wouldn't have been calling up and saying anything about it. They would have been keeping it quiet. And on top of that, she's saying that he suffered a mental breakdown. Now, we don't know exactly what happened. The white media is jumping to conclusions. The police are putting out stories. And as we saw with George Floyd, Tamir Rice, Walter Scott, and countless other cases, the police always claim that a black person attacked them. And then we get cell phone videos showing exactly the opposite of what they said. But even if it is what they say, which it most likely isn't, this is still a case of diminished capacity. This is a mental health crisis, just like Rodney Hinton. It's a mental health tragedy, but not a crime. According to the white media, the family of the accused reportedly issued a statement that the white media is characterizing as an apology. Well, that alone should be good enough for anyone. From the police and the white media's own accounting, even if he did hit this cop with his car, it was not intentional. And for the sake of argument, even if they can say that it was intentional, well, the man was clearly suffering a mental health breakdown. That's what this was about. And if Mr. Black was Mr. White, then the only thing the white media would be saying is that he had mental health issues, that this is a man who had a long-standing track record of mental illness. They would be having all sorts of experts saying, well, what could have been going through his mind? Clearly, he wasn't thinking straight, etc., etc. And they'd be having all of his family, friends, co-workers, anybody they bumped into saying what a good guy he is. They wouldn't be trying to demonize him. They would be busy doing what they always do with non-black offenders, which is humanize them. Tell everybody how human he is. Go ahead and tell him about his trials and tribulations and how whatever he's accused of clearly couldn't have been his fault. But the real crime here happens to be that Louisiana legislation. That law is not about public safety, obviously, because the police are not members of the public. This is a political piece of message legislation by corrupt politicians trying to protect violent criminals. And the police are not in the business of public safety anyway. They are a taxpayer-funded street gang. Police in America began as the slave catchers. That's the basis of so-called law enforcement in America. They make it a point to employ as many white supremacist foot soldiers as they can to carry out racial ambushes. The function that the police carry out under white supremacy is to use organized violence in order to force citizens to comply with the immoral and often blatantly unconstitutional laws that these corrupt politicians pass. The only reason that the rich and powerful have their entrenched position is because they are given all kinds of things through policy that the working class income people are not given. These are policy decisions. They've been handed the fat of the land. In fact, it's beyond merely handed to them. It is reserved for them. You are not even allowed to come near what they see as theirs, and it sits there unless and until they finally are prepared to come and get it. How do you compel people to live under an evil racist system that mandates they be a permanent oppressed minority? You can't, unless there's a guaranteed threat of violence behind those policies. That's the function that the police serve under white supremacy, to maintain an unequal and unjust status quo through organized violence. They are the guarantors of the goodies, giveaways, and guarantees that white power gives to those classified as white at the expense of those who are black. A law that classifies a specific job as being the basis for hate crime protection, that shows what a joke white supremacy is, but it's not a funny one. It's deadly serious, because the racists in these legislatures, who in many cases are former police themselves, they set up these laws specifically in the hopes of intimidating citizens who are being menaced or threatened or assaulted by police from protecting themselves. This is all about emboldening thugs with badges to attack citizens and trying to intimidate those threatened citizens into thinking that they shouldn't do anything to protect themselves. The police have been the aggressors in these cases. not the victims. Trying to manufacture phony, made-up categories of hate crimes victims, that's all done for the sake of giving police a pass to harm the real victims of hate crimes. And this is the reason that we, foundational Black Americans in specific, require a hate crimes law specifically to protect us, and that any sort of anti-Black hate crime law must of a necessity include harsh punishments for the police, who are one of the main perpetrators of hate crimes against Black Americans. Because no matter what any racist reprobate in any legislature thinks, the police are out of control. Black people are being targeted constantly, and we have no obligation to sit on our hands and hope that the very thugs and racists who are gunning us down won't be looking to target us today. White supremacy has always loved to indulge this psychological masturbatory game where they pretend as if whatever they say is reality simply because they said it. And that's why we've made it our mission to ignore what they say and to ensure that at the end of this game, they are the ones who are going to lose. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors: Deep I-904, Earl Pearl, Walter Wilborn, Kareem Lawless, and Leftrabia Lawson. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.